Hi, my name is Robert. This video is designed to give you step-by-step detailed instructions on completing the task at hand. Please read the comments in the About section of this video. It has valuable information and updates. My YouTube channel has a disclaimer video that I encourage you to watch. And please like, share, and subscribe. I hope you found what you're looking for. Thank you very much for watching. In this video, I'm going to share with you how to rebuild a cylinder head from a car. This vehicle in particular was a Volvo with a double overhead cam. The head just is going to be rebuilt because it's going to be placed on a car that has a damaged cylinder head, probably from overheating. Now, in rebuilding the head, I believe there's basically 4 things that you want to do. Number 1, you want to clean it. The machine shop vac cleaning it does most of that work for you, and you can clean it more aggressively if you like. Number 2, you want to make it true so that it's absolutely flat on the bottom. Give you a good start when you're installing it to make sure that it mates well with the head when you're installing the head back on with the gasket. Number 3, you can rebuild the valve stem seals. A lot of cars, once they get 10 years on them or have a lot of miles, the valve stem seals get old, hard, they don't seal real good, and when the car is idling, it leaks oil past the valve stem seals, sometimes causes smoking and stuff like that. And then the 4th thing you want to do is leak test it to make sure that the head is not cracked or the valves are not leaking where they're not seat properly. And if you got leaky valves, that can lead to burnt valves in short order. So you want to clean it, make it true, place the valve stem seals, and then leak test it. To have a shop rebuild the head, it can cost anywhere from $350 to probably $600, as long as they don't have to replace any of the valves. If they have to replace valves, valves cost anywhere from $20 to $100. The exhaust valves on a turbo car are most expensive. So if you can rebuild this yourself, that'll save you a lot of money. For an example, I had a shop one time vac clean and made a head true for me, and it only cost me $45 to have them do that. Most shops charge between $70 and $150 to make it true and vac clean it. So only expense you would have after that is your valve stem seals, your lapping tool, and the other tools involved in removing the valves and reinstalling them. Once you have those tools, you should be able to reuse them for several heads. If you're only doing it for one job, I believe I bought the tools to remove my valves. Everything costs maybe less than 20 bucks. So you can do this relatively cheap, or you can pay somebody $400 or $500 to do it. These are the tools and equipment I use to rebuild a head. I have a level to check the head for trueness, or you could use a metal ruler like I have there. Those are usually nice and flat. I have grease to help me with the keepers. I have this 8-inch clamp I got from Harbor Freight for like $4.50. You can get special needle nose pliers to help get the valve stem seals out of there. I just use my hook nose. I've seen some that are custom made for it. I got my depth gauge for my spark plugs. I got my little screwdriver with my 11mm deep socket that I use to seat the valve stem seals back in the head. I got a couple of small screwdrivers, accessory screwdrivers. Got a little rubber pad that I use to clamp the bottom of the valve so I don't mess up the valve with the clamp. I got scissors. I have this valve grinding compound, and I bought these 2 little pieces here, a plumbing piece, inch, and then a plug to help me, and I grind the middle of it out like that with a roto zip or a Dremel so I can use it to compress the top of the valves, and then use my tools to get the keepers in and out. And this plug, I'm going to cut the end of it off so that it can sit in the top of this and be used against that clamp and not cause that clamp to fall down in there, this part of the clamp here. So let me show you how I do it, but those are the tools and stuff that I use to rebuild the head. Here's the receipt from those two PVC pieces I bought. They're 1/2 inch size. They fit inside the valve area and help me get these valve stem seals and valves out. I use some tape, some of this painter's tape, to tape the rubber tip, which was actually like a foot of a chair or something that you could buy at the hardware store. I cut it off, so you know, any kind of rubber thing to protect your valve. Then that little plastic piece I sawed off, so it's just a little bit sticking into that round tube I have. I taped it to there to hopefully speed up my process so I don't have to hold that stuff in place while I use it. I found it a little easier to use the clamp with the PVC piping if I taped it up like that so that it wouldn't come loose. I actually had the thing pop off and the PVC piping hit the ceiling and it's just a mess. So I taped it up so that wouldn't happen no more. That worked out a lot better. It was a little quicker. Now the information I'm sharing with you is a result of me visiting several machine shops, putting information together bit by bit, you know, finding out what needs to be done. And one machine shop I stopped by, they had lost a guy that was doing most of their head rebuilding, so he told me a few things to do in the check to make sure that the head was in good enough condition to reinstall on the motor. Another shop really didn't want anything to do with rebuilding Volvo heads, so they told me things that they did. And just from visiting a few machine shops, I've gathered information that I'm sharing with you. Now this motor in particular doesn't have a valve cover gasket per se. It has a cam cover, and this cam cover is sealed with a anaerobic sealant, a type of sealant that a lot of auto manufacturers use. Anaerobic means that it dries in the absence of air. So this sealant is used to glue the cam cover on and seal it from leaking, oil leaks and stuff. They do oil pans and other things like that as well. So once you, of course, take all the bolts out the cover and lift the cover up, you want to lift the cover up from the front end on the cam sprocket side on this vehicle where the timing belt goes, because inside this side of the motor there's some cam lobes that you don't want to damage. A lot of people crack them and damage them. So this part comes up and then you lift off the back, and you either lift it straight up or you lift it swinging this end up so that you don't damage those lobes. So let me open it up and show you those lobes. You can also open it front to back, which will open as well, but you got to make sure you get these pins free on the front and back, or they'll grab the cover and keep the cover on as well. So let me go ahead and flip this over. Now this is the underside of the cam cover, and here's these cam journal lobes that I was referring to. And as you can see, these on this one are not damaged, and you want to protect those by lifting this cover straight off or hinging it toward the back. The pins go in these holes. That'll stop you from hinging it up as well, but sometimes people do break these journal lobes there. Now once you have this off, you need to scrape away all this anaerobic sealant. I normally send the head and the cover to the machine shop before I do anything else to it other than leak check it, just so that they can get most of the cover clean inside and out. Then I just have to deal with the residue. You never want to clean motor parts or head parts with Scotch-Brite pads. I heard that those pads leave microscopic fibers behind that are harder than the metal of your motor and can wear your motor out in just a couple hundred miles. So clean them with some kind of scrapers and acetone and stuff like that, but don't clean them with those Scotch-Brite pads. So the cover's off, the cam is still in the head, and under the cam you'll have the lifters. They're hydraulic lifters. I normally lift those out with a magnet and I store them in a place. The lifters on this vehicle are hydraulic lifters, so they do not have to be kept in order. If you do not have hydraulic lifters, you have to keep those in order, put them back in the head the way they came out. It's that way you don't have to do a valve adjustment. So you see how that cam sits in the head, and then the seal sits like that. That's about how far back the seal needs to be on the front side. On the back side, you don't want it back too far. You want it inside the head, but not pushed all the way in, because on the inside of the cam cover, you have oil passages that need to feed oil behind those seals to keep the head lubricated along these journal tracks. And there's smaller oil seal passages up through here. Keep the seal lubricated and keep these cams lubricated in the journals. So here's holes that feed oil up through there while the motor's running, and the passages feed oil through there. So when you put this cover back on, you don't want to put so much sealant in here that you clog these passages. I've seen them clogged in a lot of motors, especially ones that have been rebuilt. So once the cover's off and you're going to lift up the cams, lift the cams straight up out of the top front like that, and then you can pivot them back and take them out of the head. Once you have all the lifters out, the first thing I do is leak check it, make sure there's not any bent valves, or you can just send it to the machine shop. There's two things that you want the machine shop to do. One, you want them to vac clean the head, which gets the head probably about 90% clean. And the second thing you want them to do is make it true, which is them planing the bottom of the head to make sure that it's flat and ready to go on the motor that you're going to install it on. Most of the time the head warps, the motor's harder, it rarely warps, but you can check it for being true by using a metal straight edge of some sort, like a metal ruler or a level or something along that lines. So this head has already been sent to the machine shop to be made true. So let me go ahead and show you what the bottom looks like, and you can see some of the passages inside the intakes are relatively clean with very little carbon buildup left in there. So let me go ahead and show you the bottom and check the bottom for trueness. Now, head gaskets is basically a metal plate or soft aluminum plate, maybe a couple sheets of metal, and they have a coating on there, kind of like a rubberized coating, so they have a certain thickness. So a head, I don't think has to be perfectly flat, but there's a limit to the warpness that they can be to get installed. But just to be on the safe side, whenever you pull a head, always send it to a machine shop. They should make it perfectly flat, and that way you don't install a head and have a head gasket leaking because the head is still warped. Now you can take a tool instrument like this, which is a level, that should be true. You can also take metal rules or different kind of metal objects that are flat and true to check these heads to see if there's any space in them. So you can lay your tool across like that. You take a filler gauge and you want to check to see if there's any space in between flat parts and other parts of the head to make sure that the head is flat and true. So like I said, this one has gone to the machine shop. It's been made true. I'm not really concerned about it, but if you got an edge that you know is flat, you can go ahead and take a filler gauge and see if it will slide under certain parts of it to see how thick that is. And maybe you can even look in a shop manual or something and see if there's some kind of limit as to how big of a gap you can have and still have a usable head. Okay, I have this 0.009 inch or 0.229 millimeter gap measurer, and I'm trying to slide it under different parts of the head, and as you can see, everywhere I bump, it actually moves the level. So that's telling me that it's not even warped to this amount. So you can try to get a gauge under it in different parts of the head to know that that head is flat. I would do it here, here, and here. If you get any space anywhere, send it to the machine shop, have it made true. Now when the head is at the machine shop and they're leak testing it, normally after they've replaced the valve stem seals, they put a soft rubber thing on a vacuum gauge tool. They put it over the cylinder, they activate it to put a vacuum on it, and then they stop the vacuum process and watch and make sure those valves don't leak. They hold air vacuum, and they may do that for 30 seconds or something like that, just to make sure that those valves are seated in the head nice and tight, and it's creating a vacuum in the intake or in the exhaust. Now, one shop told me another way to do that if you don't have that vacuum tester. It's not preferred, but you can also pour a liquid in there, and these valves should hold that liquid. You could leave that liquid in there 5 minutes. Now, when I asked the machine shop what kind of liquid should be used, I asked about oil and different stuff. They said probably the best liquid to use is your coolant mix. So you could take old coolant or new coolant, 50-50 mix, pour it in each of your cylinders, and then look down at the valves to make sure that that coolant is not leaking out of those valves. If it is, make a note of which valves that is. When you pull those valves to replace the valve stem seals, you want to give a very close inspection of those valves, or you want to make sure those valves are seated properly by either having a machine shop seat the valves or by lapping the valves yourself until they make a good seat. So I have some coolant here. I'm going to be careful not to spill it on the outside of the valves. I'm going to fill up these chambers almost to the top, and then I'm going to check the bottom of the valves to make sure that those are not leaking. Now, if you got bent valves or a burnt valve, that's easy to tell, and you can check really quick to see if they're leaking. But if you just got it back from the shop and you want to check it, or you want to check it before you send it to the shop, you can do it this way and decide whether or not you want the shop to lap the valves or if you want to lap the valves. Now I've had that coolant in the cylinders for about 5 minutes. Now I look down here to see if any of these valves is leaking, and this first one appears to be leaking, and that's the only one that appears to be leaking. So what I want to do is double check that intake valve there when I go to put this head back together after I replace the valve stem seals. Make sure I get that valve seated properly, and I want to check it for pitting and cracks to make sure that that valve is not going bad. So now that I checked the intake side, I'm going to make a note of that leaking valve. I'm going to flip the head over and check the exhaust valve side. Okay, I've had the coolant in the exhaust ports for probably about an hour, and when you come down here, I don't see any of them leaking. So they're all sealed very tight and good. So this head has one intake valve that's seeping a little bit, and the rest are nice and tight. Ways you can check to see if the valve is sealed. Number one, and shine a very bright light on the valve. You look down in the valve hole. If you see any light shining down into the valve area, like the intake or the exhaust, you know that valve is not lapped. I don't see any light that way. You can also shine the light in the area like that. you see the light coming out this hole. If there was some of the valve that wasn't lapped, you could probably see the light peeking out around the valve. Flashlight shining in the hole of the valve, and you can see daylight coming around the valve till I close it off. Now you can't see no light shining around it. So I'm going to recycle this coolant. I pour it into a drip pan, pour the drip pan back into my coolant container for the next time, or dispose of it through a salvage yard or something like that. If you feel that this information was useful, please like it and share it with your social media friends. You can subscribe to my channel so that you will get notifications of future videos that I post. You can follow me on Twitter, and if you need to contact me directly, please visit my website. And if you have any questions, leave them below, and someone or myself will reply to them. Again, thank you very much for watching.